Vivid verses.
The manila folder sat on the kitchen island like a landmine. David Chun noticed it the moment he walked through the door of his craftsman-style home in Auburn Hills, still wearing his charcoal suit from the office. The folder was positioned with deliberate precision on the granite countertop, centered exactly between the stove and the refrigerator where he couldn't possibly miss it. His wife Rebecca's car was in the driveway. He'd parked behind it, but the house felt hollow in that particular way that meant she was upstairs waiting. He set his briefcase down and loosened his tie. The October sun slanted through the kitchen windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. Everything looked normal. The espresso machine he'd bought last year, the herb garden Rebecca had started on the windowsill but hadn't maintained, the collection of Williams and Thames cookware they'd received as wedding gifts 3 years ago. Everything except the folder. David had built a career on pattern recognition. As a senior risk analyst for North Point Financial, he made his living identifying discrepancies in complex data sets, finding the threads that didn't match. His brain worked like a sorting algorithm, constantly cataloging, comparing, cross-referencing. It was what made him excellent at his job, and, he'd thought, reasonably good at his marriage. He opened the folder. The document inside was typed, not handwritten, he noted, in Calibri font, single-spaced. The header read, "Mutual expectations for our marriage." Below it, 15 numbered items, each one more intrusive than the last. 1. All household cleaning schedules to be followed as designated, with completion confirmed via a shared digital checklist. 2. Grocery shopping to be conducted jointly every Sunday at 10 a.m., with prior list approval. 3. All purchases over $50 require advanced discussion and mutual agreement. 4. Social engagements with individual friends limited to once monthly, with 2 weeks' notice. 5. Evening schedules to be coordinated by 9 a.m. each day. The list continued. By item 12, something about requiring permission before inviting his brother over. David's analytical mind had already completed its initial assessment. This wasn't a conversation starter. This was a power play. He read through the list twice more, his face expressionless, cataloging not just the demands but the language patterns, the specificity of certain items, the notable absence of any reciprocal obligations. The document mentioned mutual expectations, but only outlined restrictions on his behavior. Interesting. Footsteps on the stairs. Rebecca appeared in the archway, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun. She'd always been pretty in an uncomplicated way. Wholesome, his mother had called her. The girl next door, if the girl next door worked in pharmaceutical sales and had opinions about thread counts. "You're home," she said, her voice bright, but with an edge underneath. "Did you see it?" "I did." David closed the folder and met her eyes. Interesting reading. She crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "We need to talk about expectations. I've been thinking a lot about our marriage, about what's not working." "What's not working?" He kept his tone neutral, conversational. An observer wouldn't have detected anything unusual, just a husband asking his wife for clarification. But David was already 3 moves ahead, running probability matrices. The formal document. The timing. He'd been in late meetings all week. The phrasing suggested external input. The confidence in her posture indicated she expected compliance, or at least extensive negotiation. "We've fallen into patterns," Rebecca said, moving into the kitchen. "Bad patterns. I'm not happy with how things are. Such as, you're never home. When you are home, you're distracted. You make decisions without consulting me. Last week you bought that new monitor for your office without even mentioning it. The monitor was $380. For my work." He paused. "Which pays for this house. See? That attitude right there." She pointed at him, her voice rising slightly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. This isn't just your house, David. It's our house, our marriage. But you act like you're running a solo operation. David said nothing. In negotiations, silence was often more valuable than speech. He watched her, noting the way she'd positioned herself between him and the folder, the slight tremor in her hand. She was nervous. This had been rehearsed. "I'm not trying to attack you," Rebecca continued, her tone softening into something that might have been conciliatory if he hadn't already mapped the manipulation. "I just think we need structure. Guidelines. So many couples drift apart because they don't have clear expectations. 15 of them. It's a starting point. We can negotiate." There it is, David thought. The reveal. This was an opening bid, deliberately inflated. Standard negotiation tactics. He was supposed to be shocked, push back, and they'd compromise on something closer to what she actually wanted. "I'll think about it," he said finally. Rebecca blinked. "You'll think about it?" "Yes. It's a significant document. I like some time to process it." "Oh." She seemed deflated, as if she'd prepared for an argument and he'd declined to participate. "Okay. Sure. We can talk this weekend." "Sure." He picked up his briefcase and headed upstairs to his office, leaving the folder on the counter. Behind him, he heard Rebecca let out a breath, frustration or relief, he couldn't tell. In his office, David sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. The new monitor, a curved ultra-wide that made his financial modeling significantly easier, glowed to life. He pulled up a blank document and began typing notes. Observation 1. Document prepared in advance. Suggests premeditation, not spontaneous frustration. Observation 2. Language patterns inconsistent with Rebecca's typical communication style. More formal, more structured. External influence likely. Observation 3. Demands escalate in specificity. Items 1 to 5 focus on shared activities. Items 6 to 15 focus on restricting my independent actions. Observation 4. No reciprocal requirements listed. One-sided control structure. Hypothesis. Rebecca has been convinced our marriage needs fixing by outside party. Probability of book club involvement, 73%. He learned about the book club 6 months ago. Rebecca had joined after meeting some women at a yoga class. Vanessa, Tiffany, and someone named Jade, whose profession Rebecca had described as lifestyle consultant, which David's bullshit detector had immediately flagged as meaningless. They met every Tuesday evening, ostensibly to discuss books. But in recent months, Rebecca had come home from those meetings with new opinions about their marriage, new concerns about his behavior, new language that didn't sound like her own. Tiffany says married couples should have complete financial transparency. Jade mentioned that healthy partnerships require constant emotional labor. Vanessa's husband checks in with her throughout the day. It's so thoughtful. David had noted each comment, filed it away. At the time, he considered it harmless. Everyone's entitled to friends and outside perspectives. But this list suggested the influence had deepened into something more problematic. He spent the next hour doing what he did best: research. Vanessa Chun, no relation, was married to a man named Patrick who worked in middle management at a logistics company. David found his LinkedIn profile easily enough. Unremarkable career, standard progression. On Facebook, Patrick's posts were sparse but telling. Lots of couple selfies with captions about date nights and happy wife, happy life. In every photo, Vanessa was front and center, Patrick slightly behind, slightly diminished. Tiffany Marsh, married to Greg, a software engineer. Their social media showed a similar pattern. Greg's posts were filled with performative domesticity. Him cooking elaborate meals, organizing the garage, building furniture. The captions always tagged Tiffany with some variation of "doing this for my queen." And Jay Morrison, unmarried, but with a rotating cast of boyfriends and a blog about feminine empowerment. That was really just repackaged relationship manipulation tactics dressed up in therapy language. Observation 5. Book club members exhibit pattern of male partners performing excessive emotional/domestic labor while maintaining facade of mutual partnership. Observation 6. Jade Morrison monetizes relationship advice. Possible motivation to encourage conflict/control dynamics among friends to validate business model. David leaned back in his chair. The picture was clear now. Rebecca had been gradually recruited into an ideology, surrounded by women who measured their worth by how much they could control their partners, validated by someone who profited from spreading that gospel. The question was, how far had it gone? Over the next week, David watched. Not obviously. He didn't change his routine, didn't mention the list again, didn't give any indication he was paying particular attention. But he was always paying attention. That was his gift and his curse. Rebecca began leaving notes. Reminders about the list, suggestions they check in about implementation. He acknowledged each one with non-committal pleasantness and proceeded to ignore every demand entirely. He bought a new tennis racket on Wednesday, $2.20. He went to dinner with his college friend Marcus on Thursday, without asking permission. He skipped the Sunday morning grocery shopping to go for a run instead. And Rebecca began to crack. Small comments at first. I noticed you weren't around Sunday morning. Said lightly, but with an edge. He'd responded with equal lightness. Yeah, got a good 10 miles in. Beautiful morning. Then slightly sharper observations. You're still doing whatever you want. Did you even read what I wrote? I did. Thoughtful document. Well, organized. Then why aren't you? She'd stopped herself, recalibrated. We need to discuss this seriously. Okay. That's it. Just okay. I'm agreeing with you. We should discuss it seriously. When would you like to have that discussion? Now. Tonight. I've got a call with Tokyo in 20 minutes. Tomorrow. The frustration on her face had been palpable. He was agreeing with everything she said while completely neutralizing her momentum. It was like trying to fight someone made of water. Observation 7. Subject becomes agitated when compliance is verbally acknowledged but behaviorally ignored. Suggests investment in control rather than actual outcomes. The real test came on Friday. Rebecca's friend Tiffany was hosting a barbecue. Casual, just a few couples from their social circle. David had been planning to attend anyway. He liked Tiffany's husband Greg well enough, and the food was usually decent. But as they drove over in Rebecca's Lexus, he could feel the tension radiating off her. She kept glancing at him, her fingers tight on the steering wheel. You'll probably see Vanessa and Patrick tonight, she said carefully. Probably. They usually come to these things. I mentioned to the girls that we're working on some things in our marriage. David turned to look at her. Did you? They're my friends. They've been really supportive. I'm sure they have been. Her jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just that friends are usually supportive. That's what makes them friends. They rode the rest of the way in silence. Tiffany and Greg's house was in a newer development, all clean lines and open concept living. The backyard had been landscaped within an inch of its life. Strategic lighting, a built-in grill that probably cost more than David's car, furniture that belonged in an interior design magazine. Greg was manning the grill when they arrived, wearing an apron that said Grill Boss in rhinestones. He waved a spatula in greeting. David, Rebecca, perfect timing. Burgers are almost up. Tiffany emerged from the house, carrying a tray of drinks, her smile wide and hostess perfect. You made it. Rebecca, Han, come help me with the salads. Rebecca glanced at David, a look he couldn't quite read, then followed Tiffany inside. David accepted a beer from Greg and surveyed the yard. 3 other couples were scattered around. Patrick and Vanessa by the pool, another couple he recognized from the neighborhood, and two people he didn't know. "How's work?" Greg asked, flipping burgers with unnecessary flair. "Busy. Q4 is always intense." "I hear that. Tiffany's been on my case about working too much. Says I need better work-life balance." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know how it is." "Do I?" Greg looked at him strangely. "Well, yeah. Rebecca mentioned you guys are trying to realign some things." David took a sip of his beer. "Did she?" "Yeah, man. No judgment. Marriage is work, right? Tiffany's got me on this whole system now. Shared calendars, check-ins, whole 9 yards. Honestly, it's been great. Less friction." David watched Greg's face carefully. The man believed what he was saying, but his eyes were tired. His smile was performative. There was a defeat in his posture that he probably didn't even recognize anymore. "Sounds structured," David said neutrally. "It is, but structure is good, you know? Keeps everyone accountable." "Everyone? Well, me mostly." Greg laughed again, that same hollow sound. "But happy wife, happy life, right?" Before David could respond, Vanessa appeared with Patrick in tow. She was a striking woman, tall, dark hair, the kind of confidence that came from being used to getting her way. Patrick was shorter, softer, forgettable. He had the look of a man who'd surrendered years ago and convinced himself it was victory. "David." Vanessa's voice was bright, sharp. "We've heard so much about you." "Have you?" Rebecca's been sharing. "It's so important for couples to be vulnerable with their community." She smiled. "Patrick and I believe in radical transparency. No secrets, no hidden agendas." "Right, honey?" Patrick nodded. "Absolutely. It's made our marriage so much stronger." David studied them both. Vanessa's hand was on Patrick's shoulder, a gesture that looked affectionate but had the energy of ownership. Patrick's smile never reached his eyes. "Transparency is valuable," David agreed. "When it's mutual." Vanessa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. That's what partnership means." Rebecca and Tiffany returned with food, and the group migrated to the long outdoor table. David found himself seated between Rebecca and Patrick, directly across from Vanessa. The conversation started pleasantly enough: work, weather, a new restaurant downtown. But David could feel the undercurrent, the way certain topics were being steered toward, the meaningful glances between the women. Tiffany fired the opening salvo. "So Rebecca mentioned you two are working on building better communication structures," she said, her tone dripping with supportive concern. "That's so healthy. Greg and I went through something similar last year." All eyes turned to David. Rebecca's face was flushed, whether from wine or embarrassment or anticipation. "Communication is important," David said evenly. "It really is," Vanessa chimed in. "And I think men sometimes don't realize how much emotional labor women carry in relationships. The invisible work of managing a household, maintaining social connections, emotional caretaking." "Emotional labor," David repeated thoughtfully. "Interesting concept." "It's not a concept, it's reality," Vanessa said, her voice taking on an edge. "Rebecca was telling us how she had to literally write out expectations because you weren't picking up on what she needed." David turned to Rebecca. She was staring at her plate, not quite meeting his eyes. "Was it your interpretation?" he asked her quietly. "That I wasn't picking up on what you needed?" Rebecca's mouth opened, closed. Before she could answer, Jade, David hadn't even noticed her arrive, appeared behind Vanessa's chair like a theatrical reinforcement. "The thing about expectations," Jade said, her voice smooth and practiced, "is that they're not about control. They're about creating clarity. When one partner resists structure, it's often because they're comfortable with the power imbalance." David looked at Jade for the first time directly. Mid-30s, expensive highlights, the kind of deliberate casualness that cost money. She held his gaze with a challenge in her eyes. Power imbalance, he said. Tell me, Jade, your blog. Reclaiming Feminine Power. Interesting name. What exactly are we reclaiming it from? Jade's smile didn't waver. From patriarchal structures that benefit from women accepting less than they deserve. And what do women deserve? Partnership, equality, respect. Respect, David echoed. Does that include respecting someone's autonomy? Their right to make decisions about their own life, their own time, their own money. When you're married, there is no your own money, Vanessa interjected. It's shared resources, shared decisions. David took a sip of his beer, buying time. His mind was processing multiple tracks simultaneously. Track 1. This is a coordinated intervention. They planned this. Track 2. Rebecca's body language suggests she's uncomfortable but committed. She's in too deep to back out now. Track 3. The men at this table are silent. They've been trained not to speak. Track 4. This is a test. They're expecting me to either capitulate or explode. Neither serves my interests. Let me ask you something, David said, his voice calm and clear. Patrick, Greg, do you have to ask permission before making purchases over $50? Patrick shifted uncomfortably. Greg looked at Tiffany. We discuss major purchases, Greg said carefully. Define major. Well, anything significant. Over what dollar amount? Silence. Patrick? Patrick cleared his throat. Vanessa and I have a system. Anything over $100, we talk about it first. Both of you? Or just you? Vanessa cut in. We both respect each other enough to communicate about financial decisions. That wasn't my question, David said, his eyes still on Patrick. Do you both ask permission for purchases over $100? Or just you? Patrick's silence was answer enough. David turned his attention to Greg. Your apron is new. Rhinestones, custom embroidery. Probably $60, $70? Did you discuss that purchase with Tiffany? That was a gift, Tiffany said sharply. So gifts don't count toward the limit. Interesting exception. David leaned back in his chair. And tell me, when was the last time either of you bought something for yourselves without asking? More silence. David looked around the table, his gaze finally landing on Rebecca. Her face was pale. This is what you want? He asked her quietly. This performance? This pretense that control is partnership and isolation is intimacy. You're being defensive, Jade said. That's a classic response when men feel their privilege being challenged. David laughed. A genuine sound of amusement. My privilege, right? The privilege of having my own life, my own choices, my own dignity. Amazing how that got rebranded as oppression. Rebecca came to us because she was unhappy, Vanessa said. She felt unheard, unseen. All we did was help her articulate her needs. Her needs, David repeated, were yours. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks less like support and more like recruitment. You build a nice little echo chamber here. Convince yourselves that control equals empowerment. And now you're spreading the gospel. He stood up, setting his napkin on the table with deliberate care. Rebecca, we're leaving. David, now. The drive home was silent. Rebecca stared out the window, her arms crossed. David kept his eyes on the road, his mind already working through next steps, contingencies, probable outcomes. When they pulled into the driveway, Rebecca finally spoke. You embarrassed me. Did I? You made a scene. You were rude to my friends. Your friends ambushed me. There's a difference. They were trying to help. David turned off the car and looked at her. Help with what exactly? Help you control me? Help you turn our marriage into a performance where I follow your rules and you get to feel powerful. That's not. You're twisting it. Am I? Let me ask you something, Rebecca. When did you start seeing me as the problem that needed fixing? She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes were shining with tears, whether real or tactical. He couldn't tell anymore. I just want us to be better, she whispered. Better. Okay. Define better. More connected. More equal. Equal. Like Vanessa and Patrick? Like Tiffany and Greg? They have good marriages. Do they? David's voice was soft, almost gentle. Because from where I'm sitting, those men are ghosts. They're puppets performing a script someone else wrote. Is that what you want me to be? I want you to care about what I need. I did care. I do care. But what you're asking for isn't care, Rebecca. It's surrender. He got out of the car and walked into the house, leaving her sitting in the darkness of the garage. Over the next 3 days, David watched the deterioration accelerate. Rebecca oscillated between tearful appeals and cold anger. She tried different tactics: guilt, shame, threats, bargaining. She mentioned therapy, separation, taking some space. Each approach was met with the same calm neutrality. If you think therapy would help, we can try it. If you need space, I understand. Whatever you think is best. His refusal to engage in her emotional whiplash was clearly driving her crazy. She wanted a fight, a reaction, something she could work with. His persistent calm was like punching fog. On Tuesday, she went to book club. She came home at 11 p.m., her eyes red, her movements sharp with anger. "They think I should give you an ultimatum," she announced, standing in the doorway of his office. David looked up from his laptop. "Do they? Either you respect me and this marriage, or we're done." Okay. That's all you have to say. What would you like me to say? I want you to fight for us. I want you to show me that you care. By following your list. By showing me that I matter. David closed his laptop and stood up. He walked over to her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You want to know if you matter?" he said quietly. "You do. You did. But you made a choice, Rebecca. You chose to listen to people who convinced you that love looks like control. You chose to see partnership as a zero-sum game. You chose to make our marriage into a battlefield. I know what you wanted. You wanted me to bend, to break, to become someone smaller, so you could feel bigger." He stepped back. "But here's the thing you didn't account for. I'd rather be alone than diminished. I'd rather walk away than surrender my dignity." Her face went white. "You don't mean that." "I absolutely mean that. You're just being stubborn. This is so typical. You always have to win." "This isn't about winning, Rebecca. This is about recognition. I recognize what you're trying to do. I recognize where it came from. And I recognize that once respect is gone from a relationship, there's no getting it back. So that's it. You're just done. Are you following your list?" She blinked. "What? Your list? Your 15 demands. Are you still expecting me to follow them?" Yes. Yes, if we're going to fix this." "Then yes," David said. "I'm done." He walked to his desk, pulled out a piece of paper, and wrote 4 words in his precise handwriting. "Find someone who cares." He handed it to her. "That's my response to your list. That's my answer to your ultimatum. Find someone who cares about playing these games. Because it won't be me." Rebecca stared at the paper, her hands shaking. "You're serious. Completely. You'd really throw away 3 years of marriage over this. You threw it away the moment you decided I needed to be managed instead of loved. I'm just acknowledging reality." She crumpled the paper in her fist. Fine. If that's how you want it. It's not how I want it. It's just how it is. You're going to regret this. Maybe. But I won't regret surrendering who I am to make someone else comfortable." She stared at him for another long moment, then turned and walked out. He heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the bedroom door slam. David sat back down at his desk and opened his laptop. He pulled up his contact list and found his attorney's name, Garrett Ross, a sharp corporate lawyer he'd worked with on a contract dispute 2 years ago. He composed an email. "Garrett, need to discuss dissolution of marriage. Asset protection primary concern. House titled solely in my name. purchased before marriage. Need clean exit strategy. Can we meet this week? David. He hit send and leaned back in his chair. The next morning, Rebecca was calmer. She'd clearly been awake all night. Her eyes were puffy, her movements exhausted. I talked to Jade, she said over coffee. David said nothing. She said I should give you space. Time to process. That you're just reacting emotionally and you'll come around. Jade said that. She's helped a lot of women through marriage crises. She knows what she's talking about. David set down his coffee mug. Rebecca, I'm going to say this one time, and I need you to really hear me. I'm not processing. I'm not reacting emotionally. I am making a clear-headed, rational decision based on observable patterns of behavior. You're not even willing to try. I tried. For 3 years, I tried. I built a life with you. I supported your career. I gave you space and freedom and respect. And you repaid that by deciding I needed to be controlled. That's not fair, isn't it? You wrote a list of demands. You recruited your friends to pressure me. You threatened ultimatums. At what point in that process did you consider my perspective? My needs? My dignity? Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I just wanted to feel important. And the only way you could feel important was by making me small. No, that's not. She stopped, swallowed. Maybe I went about it wrong. Maybe, okay, I did. I went about it wrong. But we can fix this. We can go to therapy, work through it. Rebecca, David's voice was gentle but firm. Do you understand what happened here? Not the surface issue, but the deeper problem. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You stopped seeing me as a partner. You started seeing me as a project. And once that switch flips, once that fundamental respect is gone, there's no rewinding it. Trust broken can be rebuilt. Respect lost. He shook his head. That's permanent. I respect you. You don't. If you respected me, you wouldn't have written that list. You wouldn't have tried to manage my time, my money, my friendships. You wouldn't have needed your book club to validate your desire for control. They were just trying to help. They were trying to recruit you into their misery. And you let them. Rebecca put her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs. A month ago, the sight would have broken his heart. Now he just felt tired. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I see it now. I see what I did. Please, David. Please give me a chance to fix this. David stood up. I'm meeting with my lawyer this afternoon. She looked up, her face stricken. What? The house is in my name. I bought it 2 years before we met. I'll be discussing the cleanest way to dissolve the marriage with minimal financial entanglement. You can't just. I can, and I am. But I apologized. I acknowledged I was wrong. I know, and I believe you mean it in this moment. But Rebecca, here's what you're not understanding. Even if you never tried to control me again, even if you threw away that list and cut off those toxic friends, I would still never look at you the same way. He picked up his briefcase. Every time you asked me something, I'd wonder if it was genuine or manipulative. Every conversation would be filtered through the knowledge that you once saw me as someone to be managed. That's not a marriage. That's a hostage situation where I happen to be free on parole. David, I'm sorry, Rebecca. I really am. But we're done. He walked out to the sound of her crying. Garrett Ross's office was downtown, all glass and steel and expensive minimalism. His secretary brought David coffee in a porcelain cup. Real coffee, not the machine stuff. Garrett himself was in his early 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of focused intensity that came from years of high-stakes litigation. Good to see you, David, he said, shaking hands. Though I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. Thanks for fitting me in. They sat in Garrett's office, the city sprawling below them through floor-to-ceiling windows. So, Garrett opened a leather portfolio. You mentioned asset protection. Walk me through the situation. David laid it out cleanly, chronologically. The timeline of the marriage, the house purchased 2 years before they met, the lack of commingled assets, the recent escalation. Garrett took notes, occasionally asking pointed questions. Children? No. Shared bank accounts? One, for household expenses. I deposit a set amount monthly. She has full access. My primary accounts are separate. Large joint purchases. Her car is in her name, financed through her dealership. The furniture is mostly from before we married or wedding gifts. Debts. She has about $15,000 in student loans. I have none. No shared credit cards. Garrett sat back, tapping his pen against his portfolio. This is about as clean as they come, he said. No kids, limited shared assets. House in your sole name with clear documentation. Oregon is an equitable distribution state. But given the short duration of the marriage and the asset situation, I don't see any complications. Timeline: if she doesn't contest, we could have this done in 6 months. Maybe less if we file as uncontested dissolution. And if she does contest, then we fight. But honestly, David, she doesn't have much leverage. The house is yours, clearly established before marriage. Your income is yours. She'd have a claim on the shared account balance and maybe some nominal spousal support for a limited duration, but we're talking minor amounts. What about her trying to claim the house was a marital asset? She could try. She won't win. The title is clear. Purchase date is documented. Unless she can prove significant improvements made with joint funds that increase the value, she's got nothing. David felt something loosen in his chest. So you're saying this is straightforward? As straightforward as divorce gets. My advice? Document everything. Keep records of all separate assets. Don't engage in any behavior that could be construed as marital waste. No large purchases, no hiding money. Keep everything clean and transparent. Already doing that. Garrett smiled. I'd expect nothing less. You're an analyst. You think like I do. They spent another hour going over strategy, timelines, potential scenarios. By the time David left the office, he had a clear roadmap. File petition for dissolution within the week. Formal separation of assets. Fair but firm division of the minor share property. No spousal support beyond 6 months. Clean break. When he got home, Rebecca was sitting at the kitchen table, the 15-item list in front of her. She'd been crying. Her face was swollen, makeup smeared. I've been thinking, she said as he walked in. David set down his briefcase. I was wrong. Not just about the list. About all of it. She looked up at him, her eyes desperate. I got caught up in what Jade and Vanessa were saying. They made it sound like I was being disrespected, like I deserved more. But they were wrong. You're a good husband. You've always been good to me. Rebecca, please just listen. She stood up, moving toward him. I'm cutting them off. All of them. No more book club. No more Jade. No more any of it. I see what they did. They twisted my thinking, made me paranoid and controlling. But I'm done with that. David studied her face. She believed what she was saying. In this moment, she genuinely thought she could undo it all. I appreciate that, he said quietly. I really do. Then we can fix this? We can start over. No. The word hung in the air between them. But I said, I know what you said. And like I told you yesterday, it doesn't matter. How can it not matter? Because you revealed something, Rebecca. You revealed how you see me when you're not monitoring yourself. You revealed that given the right circumstances, the right influence, you're willing to turn our partnership into a power struggle. But I won't do it again. I learned. You learn not to listen to those particular friends. But what happens in 5 years when you meet new friends? Or read a different book? Or join a different group that tells you that you deserve more, that I'm holding you back, that a real partner would do X, Y, Z. I wouldn't. You would. Because the problem isn't external, Rebecca. It's internal. Somewhere along the way, you became someone who could write that list, who could think those demands were reasonable. Who could orchestrate that ambush at dinner? He shook his head. And I can't unknow that. She sank back in her chair, her face crumbling. So there's nothing I can do? No, you won't even try. I tried. Every day of our marriage, I try to be a good partner. What I won't do is spend the rest of my life trying to prove I deserve basic dignity and autonomy. Rebecca was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. What happens now? I filed for dissolution this afternoon. You'll be served papers in a few days. The house is mine. That's non-negotiable. Everything else, we could divide fairly. My lawyer will send over a proposed settlement. That's it. That's it. She nodded slowly, like she was processing information in a language she didn't quite speak. For what it's worth, she said, I did love you. I do love you. I know, David said. But love isn't enough when respect is missing. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and logistics. Rebecca moved out to stay with her sister in Portland. David kept the house, as expected. The settlement was exactly what Garrett had predicted. Clean, fair, quick. 6 months after finding the manila folder on his kitchen counter, David Chun signed the final divorce decree. He felt neither triumphant nor devastated. Just resolved. He kept the house, kept his job, kept his dignity. And in the end, that was worth more than any marriage built on submission could ever have been. The night the divorce was finalized, David sat in his office with a glass of scotch. The good stuff, the bottle he'd been saving. Through the window, he could see the lights of Auburn Hills spreading out below his hillside home. His phone buzzed. A text from his brother. Heard it's official. You okay? David typed back, better than okay. And he meant it. He'd learned something valuable through all this. He'd learned that there were people, maybe a lot of people, who confused control with connection, who thought love meant one person diminishing themselves to elevate another. He'd learned that there were entire communities built around this toxic ideology, dressed up in the language of empowerment and equality. But he'd also learned something else, that he'd rather be alone than pretend to be smaller than he was. That dignity and autonomy weren't negotiable. That respect, once lost, could never truly be reclaimed. The scotch was smooth and warm. Outside, the city lights glittered like possibilities. David raised his glass to the empty room, to the life he'd protected, to the future he'd preserved. To standards, he said quietly, and drank.
Thanks for listening.